Hi there. So this video, we're gonna try something new. I got this at Walmart several weeks ago, maybe even months ago. It says confetti glitter, but to me, it's basically shredded cellophane. I kind of have something in my head that I really want to see how it turns out. So I'm going to do an ink swirl, and then I'm actually going to lay that on here. Possibly the whole thing, but for sure in patches. But like I said, possibly the whole thing. This is just a thing in my head that I have no idea what it's going to look like. So we're going to find out together. So the inks I'm going to use are all going to be Bria Reese. I just like the vibrancy of most of these. So these 4 colors plus white. Light blue, medium magenta, purple, and turquoise. Lots of white. I don't really care if there's white swirls, but this just gives these colors a lot of different shades. So needs some kind of breathing protection. Some people need eye protection. The fumes are toxic, especially when heated. And then I have my heat gun. This is just to get the inks moving. It's not for popping bubbles. It's not for anything other than getting the movement that we need on here once the inks are dropped. Because we're actually going to take it off of here and do some up and down tilts. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to mix up probably 30 milliliters of epoxy because I like to have too much, but I'll probably only end up putting 20 on here. You want it on there enough that it moves plenty, but you don't want it dripping off because that's not what we're going for. If you don't already have something protecting your surface, make sure and put something underneath it, whether it's parchment paper, a silicone mat, newspaper, anything, because this can get messy, and I have made lots of messes doing this in the past. Got this on here nice and thick. I'm just going to give it a minute to level out a little bit. You want to make sure that your turner isn't, or your cup at least, is not super tilted. Otherwise you'll end up with a lump here or here. And also you want to make sure your timer's on for the amount of time that you need, because I have had plenty that I didn't have the timer long enough, and I ended up with a stripe right here of little dimples. Nah, dimples is the wrong word. I would just call them little drips right there. So of the 30 that I put on here, that I mixed up, I've got 12 left, maybe. Not a lot, but definitely more than 10 milliliters. So I used about 2/3 of it. So what I'm gonna do now is just drop colors all over. Don't forget your bottom. You want to make sure that you have some colors swirling down there. Doesn't usually matter what the bottom looks like, but people still see it sometimes, so if that matters to you, don't forget. Some people put their logo on the bottom. I don't do that. I've kind of thought about it, but I'm worried about getting more orders than what I can handle. So that was Lake Blue. And let's do some magenta. I'm not sure that turquoise and Lake Blue are going to be different enough, so we may not end up using that one after all. We're going to see. If I go crazy on this, we may not need purple either. Kind of curious someday to do a base layer with white epoxy, just dyed with epoxy dye. just to see how the colors respond. Maybe someday. And now just regular purple. I don't need a ton of this one because, like I just mentioned, they're kind of blending together. But sometimes it's nice to have like definite purple when you want it. All right. Our bottom is pretty close to covered. Let's do a drop of the turquoise just to see how different it is. We won't do very much of this. Just a few little drops here and there. Add to that. All right. So now let's get heavy-handed with the white. I'm not positive, but I think the pigments in these can settle. I've got one tutorial where I used a pinata white, and it made like this weird, like almost was like paint chips or something in it. It was weird. It turned out super cool, but not really what I was going for, but turned out nice. See how that's absorbing into that color? That's why I picked this color of white versus the pinata. I don't feel like this has as much vibrancy as the pinata does. All right. I like to put a little drop right back in the center of them. Kind of gives it a little bit different breakup. It absorbs it, so to speak. Okay, so that is all the inks I'm going to do for the moment. I'm going to give that a minute for the colors to kind of absorb into each other. Not all the colors, obviously, but the white and the other colors to kind of do their thing. And let's put our mask on. All right, you can kind of see how some of this is already moving around. That's great. That means I don't have to do a whole lot of heating up to get some of the movement that I want. So we're going to do this guy now. I'm going to be about 4 inches from my cup. You don't want to get so close that you scorch it, but you got to get close enough that you actually do what you're trying to do. Like I said, this doesn't need a whole lot right now because it is moving really nicely. So we're going to take it off our turner and start moving it vertically. And just tilt it all different directions. You'll get these really awesome, not waves, but kinda. And it never fails that there's always one part of the cup that always looks so much cooler than the rest. No matter how hard you try to make it even, it just, for some reason, doesn't always go evenly. Keep an eye on the rims when you're doing this because it will drip off. We're just going to let gravity do its thing. We're rotating that way and this way, and when you see some patches that need some attention, you can kind of watch to make sure that it's going where it needs to go, but you also have to watch right here where it's about to drip off. It's a delicate balance of getting it to move, but not falling off. I'm going to heat it up just a little bit more. I really only zapped the spots that I felt like weren't moving very well. I need this to move a little bit here, so I'm going to put that on the bottom so it kind of pools a little bit. See how it's changing shape there. Just up and down, up and down. Whoop! You see that? We almost had a little kamikaze drop there. I don't have very many bald spots. It's not the end of the world if there's a spot that doesn't have ink, especially since we're about to put something on top of it. But if that bothers you, just kind of finagle it to where you can kind of shrink them at least a little bit. That's so pretty. I kind of hate to cover this up. Just going to kind of let that go that way and let this go over here to this other section that I have kind of a bald spot forming right there. I'm just going to kind of maneuver. Again, watch for the drips. Okay. That's not really going to do what I want it to do, but that's okay. So let's put it back on the turner. Oh, when you're doing this, make sure whatever you have holding your cup onto your turner arm, make sure it's secure, either a really tight fit or some shelf liner or something. You want to make sure that you are not going to lose that, because I have so done that before and it's a little infuriating. It's embarrassing when it happens on camera, which has happened. So we're going to let this turn and just do its thing for about 2 hours. This is Envirotex Light Epoxy, not Quick Set. The top coat will be KS Resin Liquidy Split, but not my base coat, because I did not want it to set before I could get a lot of good movement. And I'm going to come back and put the cellophane pieces all over it right after. Or not right after, in about 2 hours. I need it not so tacky that it won't stick, but I don't want it liquid enough that it just kind of soaks in and settles in. So we'll be back for that. All right, so it's been about an hour and a half since I walked away from this. I've kind of test drove a couple of pieces on the bottom here. I don't think I want to use the bigger pieces that are in here, so I'm going to actually go ahead and take those out of the top so that I can just use mostly the crumbly stuff at the bottom. I just didn't want to lay right, and maybe because there's not as much epoxy on the bottom as there is on the top. So this is what I'm going to do. Just kind of that right there, all over, and then I'll pat it down in just a little bit. Oh, that was beautiful. Don't try and pick them up when you're done. Once it's down, it's down. Let's put that back where the bald spot now is. My goodness. I don't like that giant chunk on there. It's different. Not exactly what I was picturing, but it'll look cool once we get it completely covered. Nope, not that one. I don't know what the function of this particular product is. I could see it being cool on some stuff, but we're gonna see how this plays out. You can achieve a similar look with chunky glitter. That's what I'll do next time, I'm sure. It's staticky, and so it's sticking to my glove. I know a lot of people are looking at this with their eyebrow up like, what is happening right now? And trust me, my eyebrow is up as well. We're gonna see. I really hope it works. I don't know how I'm gonna get this to lay down properly. I think that might be a problem. I'll be throwing the rest of this package away, I'm sure. I don't really foresee me doing this again in my future. Maybe it would look cooler with shredded cellophane, like in strips, versus chopped up like this. Let's just hand place a couple pieces on the bottom. Lower those down. I don't know about this. All right, that's it for now. So now I'm going to very strategically try and pat this down. If this works out, it's going to look pretty cool, like shards of glass on here. But I think some of this is just going to have to stick up, and I'm going to have to trim it by hand and then try and get it to lay down after a clear coat. I'm going to have to give it a haircut too every once in a while. So I'm just going to pat down a little bit more. This is quite interesting at the very least. This has been out here kind of doing the whole settling thing for the past, I don't know, almost hour now. Don't need that turning. So I'm just going to kind of work on pushing these down into the epoxy. I think what I'll do on the future ones, I'll let my inks do their thing, and then I'll actually let it cure completely, and then do this on a clear coat. I think that would be a better idea than what I've got here. But like I said in the beginning, this was something in my head that I wanted to see how it would work. And I'm very quickly learning that, I mean, it can work. Just gonna take a little effort to make it happen properly. Yeah. So that's all I'm gonna do for the rest of the night. I'm not gonna do anything else to it tonight. Just let it finish curing, and then, like I said earlier, I'll give it a haircut and cut off some of these really big chunks and smooth it out that way, just a little bit more. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Okay, so here's what it looks like. I've given it a haircut and chopped off the bigger chunks, and I went around and picked off the excess layers. Some of them had several pieces stuck together, and so I just kind of pulled them apart and trimmed them as much as possible. And then I went outside to clear coat it and was not paying attention, and now I have a giant white spray painted area right there where I can't do anything about it. I got some of it off with acetone right away. There's no coming back from that. So now this is going to become a peekaboo, which is fine. I was kind of wondering where this was going to go. We're just going to see what it looks like. Who knows? So I've mixed up 30 milliliters of epoxy, and we are going to coat that, see what happens. As it thickens, I'm going to push down some of these bigger pieces, so I'm not real worried if I end up with indentions in my epoxy, because I can just do another coat over it to fill in the indention a little easier than I can put another coat over to fill in where the peaks are going to be from this. So that's what we'll do, and we'll see what's next after that. Had my epoxy on here for a couple of minutes, aka about an hour. I did use the KS Resin Quick Set liquidy split. So this is what I mean by coming out here, or coming back to it and pressing some of these pieces down. I'm just pushing them down into it. Now that this is a little thicker, it's actually more likely to stay down, and that's going to work in my favor. So like I said just a minute ago, I can always kind of fill in the divots a little bit easier. The nice thing about this is I feel like once it's sanded, you won't really, it'll just look like little pieces. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I'm really irritated with this spot right here, but I'll just turn it into a peekaboo and we'll see. And this video may never see the light of day. It may end up in the strip bucket. Who knows? But I figured it was worth a little bit of epoxy to see if it worked out. Because if it does, I'm intrigued to see how it turns out. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. Lesson learned. So I'm just going to go around this cup again and just try to flatten out as many places as I can. Some of these, the epoxy underneath is too thick, and so it's not going to go down. But this thing looks a fright right now. And if you're laughing, I'm laughing with you, because I'm not laughing. I'm scratching my head more than anything. I'm kind of wondering what in the world I could have been picturing in my head that could even remotely resemble this. And I'm thinking it didn't look anything like this. But that's okay. You live and you learn. And if it looks amazing, then we may have just discovered something super cool. So that's what I'm going to do, is finish going around. This piece right here, it really stands out because it's really thick. And I think it's silver. I don't know why it's silver when everything else is clear holographic. So I'm just going to go around the whole cup and continue pressing down like that spot right there. And then just kind of put the epoxy right over it, and it'll smooth out. Because I'll turn my arm back on. So yeah, we'll come back to this tomorrow night, put another coat on it, and then we'll deal with sanding and spray painting. Okay. So this looks weird, but this is cured enough that I can touch it with my fingernail, and it's kind of sticky. Kind of see and hear that difference. So what I'm doing is actually flattening it out a little bit, because it's still soft enough that I can do stuff like I can do that. So I've got a piece of parchment paper here, and I'm just putting my weight behind it and pushing it flat. I'm experimenting to see how that helps smooth this out. I know it's dull in some spots right now, but that's okay because I'm gonna put another coat of epoxy on it. But this flattened it out significantly, so this is gonna really help not have to slice and dice quite so much. So I'm just gonna do that a little bit more. Just put it back into it. And that makes a huge difference. You can kind of see the edges, like looking at it from that angle. You can kind of see how flat that is. So I'm glad I came out here to check on it when I did, because I think that's going to make a huge difference there on the success and the end result. Again, since this is just a experiment, we're just going to see where this keeps going. I do have a spot where I flattened that out, and it just kind of squeezed it out, almost like a pimple. It's kind of gross to think of it that way, but it's accurate. So yeah, I'm going to put another coat of epoxy over this and then let it just keep curing. Let it rotate for about 2 hours. I'll set my timer, and then I'll come check on it tomorrow after work. Here's what we look like with 2 coats of epoxy. Not terrible. I think we're getting there. I am going to go sand it, and I'm going to wet sand it because I really got to get in there and get it smoothed out. There are a lot of really sharp edges here that kind of lifted up after I walked away last night. But overall, I think it's actually going to turn out kind of cool. We'll see. Had I not accidentally done that, this may have looked kind of cool without something over it. But we'll see. I'll go sand it. I'm not going to lie. I'm actually happy with how it's looking right now. So what I did, I didn't just wet sand it. I actually took 80 grit sandpaper on my orbital. I took it down a good bit, and then I went over it again with the 220 grit, and then I went and wet sanded it a little smoother at the actual sink underwater. So true wet sand at that point, but not at the beginning. I used my orbital. So I've washed it with Dawn, dried it, got off any lint that was there, and then I went ahead and put a clear coat of spray paint on here, because I am going to go ahead and do one more coat of epoxy just to finish out the smoothness. You can see as it turns, it's not quite smooth, I got it pretty much as good as I could without taking it too far down into the actual cellophane and inks, because there is such thing as too much, and I was worried about doing that. But overall, it's looking pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it. So that's next. One more coat of epoxy, and then it should be smooth enough to do the spray paint layers for the peekaboo. So here is the finished product. I really like it, and I'm actually not all that upset about that spray paint area. I may go ahead and do a Milky Way over this. I may do it as a peekaboo, but I might just see how it goes as is for the moment. I do feel like I might need to sand it just a little bit more. I've got kind of a wave right there, but overall, it's really cool because it's got depth. I don't know if you can see it right there. It just has a very 3D look to it because of how much epoxy it took to get it smooth. But overall, it's done. Well, I guess I am going to have to go ahead and Milky Way because I forgot. I got a little crazy right there, so I have no paint. So I'll sand it down really good one last time and then do a Milky Way over it. But there's no need for the video because it'll look just like the other Milky Ways I've done. But I like it. It's very cool. I think the next one I do, I might do it with this, like the shredded confetti this way, not the chopped up confetti or cellophane, I mean. I think it'll look cool. So don't be afraid to try new things. It's kind of interesting. I mean, worst case, it fails. You strip it and you use your cup for something else. So yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, be sure and leave it in the comments. I'll be happy to give it a try and answer it. If you like my videos, please consider subscribing. Y'all have a good one.